We are now transitioning into the last session for the day. And I just want to commend all of you for being very committed to this forum. Thank you so much. The last session is looking at a very key topic, which is financing the green and circular economy. So we have talked about how circularity is imperative for sustainability, environmental concerns. We've also talked about the huge economic potential, and I think the last panel also underscored the many economic opportunities that this sector provides. But we know it's also hinged on one key factor, which is finance. And we've already alluded to finance being a constraint. We've already heard about some of the innovative financing initiatives, blended finance. We've heard about a few other ideas in terms of how the structuring can be done. But there's still a lot of constraints because of the perceived risks. Obviously, knowing that many of these projects are very early stage, the return might not be immediate. So this last session is really going to delve into all the nuances related to finance. And we will start with a presentation by, I beg your pardon, I think he's dialing in online, by Matthew Haden. He will be going into plastic credits. And we'll be looking at how it can be used as a tool to finance the circular plastic economy. Matthew is the managing director of the Recycler Limited.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. My name is Matthew Haden. I was in Zambia recently, earlier in the year, presenting on different ways to improve recycling and help people do recycling. Now I'm just discussing plastic credits with all of you. So to start with that, I'd like to firstly just dive into why this is important in terms of generation, in terms of waste across Zambia and across Africa. Right now, Africans produce the least amount of waste per capita than any other region. So it's less than 200 kilograms per year. But as the population in these countries grow, this is going to increase. And eventually by around 2080, so in about 40 or 50 years, you're going to see that the most waste is actually going to be produced in sub-Saharan Africa. So you can see that orange line, it starts at one of the lowest, and it's going up to the very top. So that means that has to do with urban populations. Of course, the populations across Africa are increasing faster than any other continent. And so sub-Saharan Africa will be the largest waste provider in terms of tons per day. Right now already, though, there are 19 of the biggest dump sites in the world are located in sub-Saharan Africa. So almost half of the biggest dump sites in the world, more than 90% of them are of waste that is generated in Africa is disposed at what we call uncontrolled dump sites. So these are the ones without leakage protection, without lining, and often have open burning. And when you break it down to plastic, 64% of plastic ends up mismanaged or uncollected across sub-Saharan Africa. And you've all seen it. Waste is everywhere. Lots of burning of waste going into the rivers, waste going to the dump sites that aren't done well. And on rating wise, I think Zambia and is ranked as some of the the worst on terms of scores of recycling rates, ocean plastic pollutions, and just general household and commercial solid waste control. And we break it down through plastic waste. Globally, only 9% of plastic is recycled. Even in Europe, in Germany, and Sweden, in these locations, you can see that in the OECD countries, the recycling, which is the sort of far right side or the teal side, is not the majority. Mostly it is landfilled, mostly it is incinerated, even in the wealthy countries. Or in Africa and sub-Saharan Africa, you can see the orange line is the biggest. And that is mismanaged or uncontrolled litter. But a lot of these countries are landfilling and or incinerating with very, very small percentages of recycling. And in Africa, it's even harder because we have, vast land mass. We're not as concentrated urbanly as other locations. Many locations do not have roads. They don't have easy ways to access. People have the lowest ability to pay. There's no at-source separation. There's lack of investment. And also poor dump site in manufacture or infrastructure means that vehicles get stuck. Low levels of enforcement and corruption. But these are the materials that are still recycled across Zambia, across Tanzania, across sub-Saharan Africa. So it's mostly hard plastic, PP, PET, and LD. And these are the different items that they're made into. And if you look in the United States, this is a breakdown in the United States. Only 20% of plastic bottles are recycled in the United States. 10% of the hard plastic. But then you can see all the rest of this plastic is not being collected. The PVC, the LDP, only 5%, the PP, less than 1%. So all of these materials are not even being recycled in a developed country. So this is sort of like how do we change this? What kind of emphasis do we need to make a big difference on this? And that's what the plastic credit is coming in for. And to describe this, it's basically the same as a carbon credit. So the way carbon credit works is a company like an oil or gas company, like I think Total or Shell are some of the biggest purchasers of carbon credit in the world. But basically, they produce carbon through their business, and therefore they want to offset that carbon by purchasing carbon credits, which is some sort of scheme that takes in the carbon. So whether it's forests or methane capture, etc. In terms of plastic credits, it's very similar. So there are companies that are producing what we call fast-moving consumer goods. This is like Coca-Cola, Unilever, anyone who makes like lots of different soaps or Procter & Gamble. These companies are producing plastic and putting it in the environment. And in theory, they should be incentivizing how to get that plastic back from the environment. And since we already see very small percentages of plastic are recycled, you need to find, and that's because it's at the market price. So at the current market price, only certain types of plastic make it to a recycling facility or can be recycled. So now this plastic credit is in theory supposed to come in to be an audited process to remove plastic from the environment, to prove that that plastic has been removed from the environment, and so that companies that produce the plastic can then offset against their claim. So there are a few really important ideas in this. The first is what we call additionality, and the second is volumes. So the first thing about it is this word that we use also in carbon credit, it's additionality. So additionality means that it needs to have a value. The plastic credit needs to be valuable in itself. So if, for instance, if there's a company that's already collecting plastic bottles, shredding them, flaking them, those are already being recycled, you're not going to get a plastic credit for that because that's already happening. It already exists. There's no what we call additionality. So you need to have projects that are looking at the plastic that currently has no market or is not being collected. That could mean secondary cities, where, instead of Lusaka, you're looking at a further place where there really is no collection. That could be focusing on different types of plastic material that nobody else is recycling, or even if there's a very small percentage of plastic bottles recycling, to increase that. All of that falls under this category of additionality. The other important thing is the volumes. So most companies will not do plastic credits unless there's a certain amount of volumes, and the current volumes that are being done don't count. So if you're doing 100 tons or 50 tons or 20 tons of collection of material on a monthly basis, you're already doing that. So there's no additionality. So the focus must be on these expansions, upcountry operations, different plastic materials, and overall on items currently not being collected. And on volumes, they want to see sort of a proven capacity to collect at least 50 metric tons per month. That's a good volume, with 50 tons being more necessary. So organizations like Alliance to End Plastic Waste, they typically expect more, around 200 metric tons a month. So these are the targets that you're looking for. If you're looking to get a plastic credit, you need to be looking at 50 to 200 tons of metric tons per month, or even more than that if possible. So when it comes to plastic credits, there are basically two different types. There's what we call verified plastic credits. I'm going to go forward, and there's impact plastic credits. And these are different in the sense that one of them is going through this regulation process. So big kind of regulators are Vera, Gold Standard, and ocean-bound plastics. And these are sort of hefty procedures that you need to go through in order to follow methodologies in order for you to become a full verified plastic credit project. And lots of companies sort of work through these standards. So for instance, South Pole, you can work with South Pole, and South Pole will help you to get registered with Vera. Maybe they do the initial, they pay for some of the certification fees because it's around $15,000. And they assist on that process with the idea that they would then purchase the plastic credits once they are registered through these platforms. So on the left you have the Vera, Gold Standard, Ocean Bounce. These are sort of verified registered bodies, and on the right you have companies like Repurpose, like Plastic Credit Exchange, like Ton to Ton, that might assist in the process of registration and are looking for new projects to do plastic credits through. And a lot of these companies started with doing carbon credits, and so now they've moved into plastic credits as a new area. So there is a large verification process when you go through these, but the revenue potential is higher than it is on impact plastics. For instance, in theory, you can get as much as 150 tons for collection. So even if you go and you're collecting plastic from the environment that would otherwise have been dumped or burned or ended up in the ocean, and you're not even recycling it, you're just putting that in a certified landfill or working for waste to fuel, that's $150 per ton that you can get on addition to the other process for collection, and then 150 euros per ton for recycling. So that means that you also do the full recycling process, which can end up to be around 300 euros per ton that you can get for the full process. This varies, of course, on project to project, but these are some indicative rates for you to understand. When it comes to recycling, it's actually not specified in the Vera and the Gold Standard what you need to see when it comes to recycling. In some cases, this could mean baling and shredding, but you need to then know exactly where your final product is going. It needs to be fully verified, the whole chain of it. And of course, it's easier if you're recycling directly yourself into that thoughts. So that's verified plastic credits, and those are some of the companies that you could connect with to try and work out that. So this is basically how it works: is there's a local government waste operator. They get a deal with someone like Stop Waste Go Circular. They open an account with Vera. They then certify the plastic credits. They sell them to a plastic buyer, and then that money goes back to the company Stop Waste in this case. So those are that's kind of how it all works, and they can use that money to obviously fund assets. There have been projects in previously where you were able to get funding for the new waste assets and infrastructure as part of the project, but most people would prefer to have to basically have the funding go through you have to fund for the waste assets, but this helps you in your business. And then there are companies that do what we call impact plastic credit projects. So there are a lot of these around and more every day. And these people, instead of going through the Vera or the Gold Standard certified systems, they look to certify their own systems. So basically they're saying, we built an app, or we built some sort of form that tells us exactly how, it proves that those plastics were in the environment and they've been removed from the environment. And then that isn't like, you don't have to go through the same registration fees as Vera or Gold Standard, because they kind of register you yourself, and they have multiple steps on the app to prove the process. So these are not as valuable as the verified, because they're not verified, but they are verified by their own systems. And so there's still people who are looking for these specific projects. All of it is voluntary currently, so it doesn't actually matter in terms of if it's verified. Eventually it will, But now even the, impact ones, people who buy impact plastic credits are also, it's a voluntary basis. So some of these can even be supported by the big companies like Nestle or Unilever or SC Johnson as part of their Go Circular is specifically by Holcim. So there are different projects that work for that. And the price range can be very, very high. Sometimes they even have a price for specific ocean-bound plastics, but anywhere between 50 euros to 30 euros per ton. This is an easier onboarding. There are fewer costs and the documentation is simpler. You don't go through this full methodology that you do, and you can kind of get started earlier. And this is what I have an impact plastic credit for my company in Tanzania. So just to give you what that is, so what we do in Tanzania, we already do recycling of lots of different materials. We do zero waste to landfill. We recycle plastic bottles, hard plastic, PP, LD, even some PVC. But what we didn't do, and we saw that there was no market for, was what we call non-recyclable plastics. So this is essentially multi-layered material that doesn't have a market, that isn't recyclable in Tanzania. So a chip packet, which has a little bit of plastic on the outside, a little bit of aluminum foil on the inside, most of the things like a Snickers bar, all of those different things that you like, even the label on a plastic bottle, all these different materials that don't have really a recyclable plastic market and were never really meant to be recycled in the first place. So we work with Clean Hub. Clean Hub pays us basically 118 euros per ton for us to collect material, to shred the material, and also to send that material to a local cement company. The cement company is then using that as waste to fuel. The whole project is audited every step of the way. When we collect any plastic, we take pictures of it scaled. We take pictures of it when it's shredded, and then it goes to a weigh bridge. And so that's uploaded, and then it goes into the cement kiln. And we have to prove that all of these processes have been in place in order for us to get the plastic credit. But what has been really nice is Clean Hub has helped with some of the upfront financing for and a couple shredders to help the process. Right now we're doing between 70 and 90 tons of non-recyclable plastic a month. But you can see that this project has additionality. No one was taking this material before. It's removing it completely from the environment, not through recycling, but through waste to fuel.